I just had a film shoot yesterday in Mexico. I wasn't there. I was via Zoom, but
Yeah, there's, I let them in already. JVP Boston, would that be like Elsa?
I don't know, could be anybody.
Okay.
How are you finding Boston, in relation to Jacksonville? Do you feel like you know which place you prefer, or? I just had a film shoot yesterday. I wasn't there.
You know who they are, it's not you, yeah, you don't know who they are.
You don't know who they are unless they're, unless they go in the chat. There's
That's Joe and Mark.
Dick Crowley and Susan Nye.
Susan Nye, okay.
Yeah, so
I can't imagine how someone gets to know a new community.
we'll spotlight us and we'll get going.
Is that live now?
Yeah. Yeah. Hello, everybody. We will start momentarily. Yeah, a few people. Let's get going. How about?
All right, sure.
All right.
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, indeed, is this mic working?
Yes. It just has to be turned on. I'll turn that on in a minute. Okay. Hand it to you. Yeah. We're hoping this doesn't set off the fire alarm. It never has before, but we always light a candle at the beginning. Candle for light, a candle for unity, a candle for strength in hard times. Welcome to Community Church of Boston. We have a really cool, wonderful program for you today. It's really a sort of a debut. This is almost our first real physical event here in the church, with two exceptions. During COVID, we did David Rovick's program, and we did we gave the Sacco Vanzetti Award to Julian Assange last July, and his brother and his father were here to receive it, and Jill Stein, lots of other people. This is a hybrid event. It's both Zoom and it's physical. Say hello, everybody.
Hi.
Yeah. We're going to start with just a little song that's one of Community Church's anthemic songs, and it goes like this. Die Gedanken sind frei, my thoughts freely flower. Die Gedanken sind frei, my thoughts give me power. No tyrant, no scholar can map them, no hunter can trap them, no one can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei, and that means my thoughts are free. I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure. My conscience decrees, these thoughts I must treasure. My thoughts will not cater to duke or dictator, no one can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei, and if tyrants take me and throw me in prison, my thoughts will break free like blossoms in season. Foundations will crumble, the structure will tumble, and freedom will cry, Die Gedanken sind frei, and freedom will cry, Die Gedanken sind frei. Yes, and I just want to welcome people to come back to Copley Square and inhabit this auditorium. It's a beautiful place in the middle of the center of the earth here, or at least it's in the center of the surrounding area, you know, and there's a lot going on out there, and we want as much radical progressive stuff to be going on in here. We have just taken in possession an enormous mountain of books from the estate of Bob Datilio. And during the COVID time, we've been processing them and sorting them and figuring out what we're going to keep and what we're not going to keep. If I could turn this around, maybe I could show you. No, I'm not gonna. But this is in the auditorium is just the tip of the iceberg. The third floor has an entire office, about 800 square feet, devoted to Bob's research on the Sacco and Vanzetti case. He was a serious, spent his whole life studying Sacco and Vanzetti, and he was a long association with us. He helped us get a famous plaque that's on the wall here that was made by Gutzon Borglum, who also did that desecration called Mount Rushmore. But this is one of his early pieces from 1927, very soon after they were executed, Sacco and Vanzetti, that is. Anyway, we have a whole room that's devoted to research on Sacco and Vanzetti. We have 2 full-time curators who are going through Bob's papers and getting them ready to be sent to some place like the Boston Public Library or a couple of other anarchist collections that are in various universities. We also have just an enormous treasure of books on things that Bob was interested in. We'll tell you about them, and I welcome you to come down and have a look through this collection. Photography, this many books, art, architecture, anarchism, communism, socialism, all the different isms. They're very well represented in the books here. There's also some very wonderful very old books. There's an enormous table that's full of poetry over there, and it goes on from there. It's really just a remarkable thing, and I try not to be overwhelmed by it, and it takes a lot of time, and it has sort of changed our direction in many ways. But that's one new thing that's going on here at Community Church. Also, in case some of you members are with us, I want to let you know about just a very tragic passing of Carolyn Poinelli. Was hit by a car in a pedestrian accident, and that just happened. And we're trying to, along with her family, make for a tribute to Carolyn Poinelli. Carolyn would have been here tonight. She was at every event regarding Palestine all over the city, and she walked and walked and walked to all the universities, to all the churches, wherever there was a Palestine event. And so let's dedicate tonight to Carolyn Poinelli. Carolyn Poinelli presente is what they say in Central America, presente. So that's what I want to tell you about Community Church. We welcome you to come down here to also attend either virtually or physically on Sundays. We have a couple of great programs. This Sunday, we're talking with 2 very powerful women who do local work in their own towns on cutting carbon emissions for the town in the buildings, the vehicles, the way the town does business, the way the town buys electricity. This is Kate Crosby from the town of Acton and Laura Burns from the town of Hingham, who will be with us. And the next week after that, May 1st, we have a longtime member, Steve Kellerman, who will give us one of his historical essays and presentations. This one is on Eugene V. Debs. Steve is a retired machinist, longtime wobbly, and also marvelous gentleman and amateur historian. That's May 1st, International Workers' Day. So tonight we have a remarkable program, and I look forward to hearing from Jen. Filmmaking is something that's maybe on our wheelhouse. We really are serious about turning this this church into not only a physical meeting, but also a virtual meeting as well. And how to do that professionally with elegance, grace, and style is a big challenge that is ahead of us. We're doing the best we can, and we hope to bring on some maybe young'uns who that's second nature, and they can help us do this better than we're doing it now. But to that purpose, tonight, Jen Marlowe is our presentation, and I want to introduce you to Steve Lowe, who brought us, Jen, and has brought us a bunch of other programs recently on the issue of Palestine, and that's something that's deep in our DNA as well. The Gralta Foundation does a lot of educational work on Palestine and the Middle East. And I want to introduce Steve, who will tell us more about tonight's program, and introduce Jen Marlowe.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Dean. I'm just going to adjust that down a little bit because I'm a short guy. So I want to just thank everyone who's with us both here tonight in person and live, or virtually via Zoom, for being here to participate and listen to this great presentation. And of course, I also want to especially thank Dean Stevens and the Community Church for organizing and promoting and hosting this event. Dean and the CCB are great friends of so many activist movements, and DonkeySaddle's projects focus and intersect many, if not all of them. We knew about Jean Marlowe's work for a long time, but we didn't meet until 2016, when Jen staged readings of her powerful play, There Is a Field, at nearly 24 major universities up and down the East Coast, and included stops at both Tufts and Harvard here in the Boston area. A year later, Jen began expanding DonkeySaddle's capacity, which means money and people, or as the economists call it, capital and labor, that have allowed it to pursue even more impactful projects. And at the same time that they've been expanding their scope, DonkeySaddle has continued to expand and promote There Is a Field, bringing its message via film and with in-person events to growing and more diverse audiences. In fact, that's what brought Jen to Boston this week, an invitation to conduct a workshop at Boston University's Center for Anti-Racism Research that's led now by the notorious Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. It's quite an honor, for Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, is now number 29 on the list of 50 books Texas parents want banned from their school libraries. Why only 29, right? Tonight, we'll be hearing from both Jen and from Gabby Haddad, DonkeySaddle's operations manager. You can find their biographies on the DonkeySaddle website, which is very simple, www.donkeysaddle.org, along with information about DonkeySaddle's past and continuing projects. So with that, here's Jen Marlowe. Thank you.
Oh, it is so lovely to be with all of you here in person and to be with all of you virtually. There's been so many firsts for me in Boston. I had my first 3 live events since COVID, and then this is my first hybrid event on the live side of the hybrid. I've done hybrid events where I've been on the Zoom side of the hybrid. But it's really an honor for that to be happening here. I'm so grateful. You know, I reached out to Steve and Barbara Lowe several months ago now, asking if they may help, if they would be willing to help organize, you know, a little intimate house party fundraiser for DonkeySaddle projects. And Steve wrote back right away saying, well, we need to connect you to the Community Church of Boston. Do you know that place? I'm like, no, it's the Community Church of Boston. I'm just thinking a small house fundraiser. What are you talking about? He sends me the website, and I get a chance to read about this magical, amazing place and all of the work that's been happening here. And Steve And then, but it still said to Steve, well, let's just keep this an intimate house party. Let's just keep things really simple. The next thing I know, Steve had two events planned, an intimate house party and today at the Community Church of Boston, and introduced me to Dean Stevens, who, as everyone here has been able to see, has just represents social justice in all of its manifestations as this place does. So it's such an honor to get to be here. And I'm really excited to be here with my amazing colleague, Gabrielle Haddad, who's our Director of Operations, and who's gonna give you a little framing about what DonkeySaddle is, this organization with this bizarre name. Who are we, what do we do, and why?
Thanks, Jen. So DonkeySaddle projects, for those of you who aren't familiar with our work, we do work that connects storytelling, art, and activism, that uses, storytelling, art, and activism to connect different liberation struggles and movements towards a common goal of collective liberation and innovative justice. And something that I find really amazing, and part of the reason why I'm so honored to be a part of this organization, is that we really center the narrative and experiences of the people and families who are impacted most by these systemic injustices and center their needs at every point. So a good example would be, we have a Palestinian grassroots distribution project where in 2014, right, remembering the Gaza war, is that filmed in 2014?
Filmed in 2015, yeah.
Filmed in 2015.
But I have the 2014 I saw.
So there was a series of short films that were filmed by Jen and a few other of our colleagues in Gaza, documenting the, at that time, most recent Gaza bombardment. And included in that was documentation of a kindergarten that had been demolished, and also families that were in need of ongoing support. And through that project, we were able to continue to this day to rebuild that kindergarten. It was demolished again, damaged significantly last year. And so once again, rebuilding that, and then also continuing to provide ongoing care for the families that we discussed and highlighted in those films. Jen is going to start us off by showing a clip from one of our projects and kind of framing how that works within the narrative of storytelling as a form of seeking justice.
Thanks. Hold on, let me see if I can. There we go. And real quick, Dean, in a moment we're gonna watch a couple film clips. And for those of you who are zooming in, we're gonna do sort of an old school, just like, it's not gonna be the Zoom screen share, it's just gonna be literally pointing to the screen. But when we start the films, will we have a way to turn off the lights?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. I think that will help.
There's
What the image that you're seeing there, these are the first two projects. These are actually the first two films that I made. The first one, Darfur Diaries, was before DonkeySaddle projects actually existed. And that was made in Darfur, Sudan. The second one, Rebuilding Hope, was made in South Sudan, and actually DonkeySaddle kind of came into existence while we were making this film, and sort of umbrella this film under which was then a brand new organization of DonkeySaddle projects. And the film, we're going to watch like an 8-minute excerpt, and you'll see that in the film, there were 3 young men who had been given the nickname, were among a community of young men given the nickname of the Lost Boys of Sudan. Refugees from South Sudan who had been resettled in the United States as teenagers and young men were kind of given that moniker because they had been unaccompanied minors when they were refugees in refugee camps, first in Ethiopia and then in Kenya. And there were 3 of these young men that reached out to me because they were planning their first homecoming trip back to South Sudan. This was in 2007. And they had fled the civil war there 20 years earlier as tiny kids. And they didn't know what had happened to their villages, whether their families were still alive. And each of them had had the opportunity to have education in Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, which they continued then in the US. One had become a teacher, and he was determined to build a school in his village. One was studying to become a nurse. He was determined to help a clinic get off the ground in his village. And the third young man, who wasn't sure yet what he wanted to do, when he went home, when we went back to South Sudan, he realized that there was an epidemic oh my gosh, I'm totally blank. It's a waterborne disease, and I'm completely blanking on the name, and it's one of the most common. Nope.
No, that's yours.
Malaria.
No, malaria is mosquito-borne. Maybe it's, I'm gonna think of it because I can't believe it's blanking on my mind. But thank you, cholera. There was a cholera outbreak in the village when we were there. I have never blanked on that before. There was a cholera outbreak in the village when we were there, and cholera is a waterborne disease that is very deadly because it dehydrates very quickly, but it's also very simple to prevent. A clean water source prevents it, and so this young man, Garang, decided he wanted to drill wells. And so I'm going to show just this 8-minute segment of the film, and then talk about how this film became, in many ways, the launching of the epic of what DonkeySaddle Projects is today.
Jen, I just had an idea.
Yes.
If you went on our link, I could co-post you. Maybe it's too, let's not do it now.
Yeah, that was sort of what I was thinking of, where I
yeah.
was thinking we could figure it, but I think.
We're still trying to figure out this hybrid thing, and I just realized it'd be very easy to do, but we're going to continue with this.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Sorry. Sorry. You
Folks
can bring it up.
watching at home, are you able to see the screen pretty well? Any thumbs up or heart emojis or something? Yeah, okay. Hopefully it'll work out. If not, I can send you all links to be able to watch at another time. And then are we able to hit the links?
Oh, yeah.
Warendi pun kawin, nyamet kawin, malay amban kawin, arendin malay jamai wabagorol, ajim kaden ilen nyali pun kawin, kubin kudir wajem majung mama kawin, wajam jerai bandera runarun bandera tiang tiang bandera kurmayual, awal barir mayual.
My greatest hobby to see the family that I have never seen for the last 20 years. The thing that I could remember back in 20 years would be when my mom come to me and sing a song. My mom used to sing very good songs. I talked to my mom that it's the last time I talked to her on the phone. If I come to a con, will you be able to recognize me? He said, my son, even though you're grown up, I still don't know you.
Kan ni ali je chứ nào ni je quá kupir ngắt chứ nào ni je mình ấy này kia giờ bên bút nó quá thì coi là cả thuông cái này nè mình này ngồi đây chút đừng nghỉ quyền mang cái chút đừng nghỉ.
The goal that I will achieve is not for myself, it's for the people that I love at home. Yep, I'm going back to go and help them with the clinic to help the people that doesn't know anything, like medical. If we can buy like basic medication, I can go and give this to people. I'm excited to help the people that I've been dreaming of helping. If you guys know about father and son system,
Tôi cũng biết cái đó bây giờ thuốc của dân cũng đi nhà ta quẹt Kan kaman si tu pe ni nggak cukup. Kenapa nak kenapa lah mau cari yang terlebih? Mana ni pe dia saya kan itu nanti. Saya jaga tapi kalau baca kan ni. Irawan lagi tu kira tu. Rian dah lagi dia kan. Dah ki yang dia kan tu. Akar hari otak. Mugare lagi ni ada lah. Ini ni tu tapi kenapa itu lagi ni?
People are coming back from northern Sudan from where they fled, but the only challenge is there's no school or clinic. There is nothing. When I first came here to the United States, I've been persecuted in my heart that I went to help my country, I went to help my people, and the best way to help would be education. This place is a holy ground for our ancestors, and the school is to the benefit of the church, and even the school will be used for the children, and ancestors will bless not only the school, but will bless the children. This is a yeah. This is a yeah. This is a boy.
Need clean drinking water. They need food security. They need schools. They need hospitals and health clinics. They were the very things that made us to go to war. For any success or peace in Darfur, you must see that the comprehensive peace agreement in the South is fully implemented. There's a lot of dragging on feet. In mix, the comprehensive peace agreement is very fragile. If the peace process in the South collapses, then the whole country all as a whole goes back to war.
It was a very fantastic day that I haven't seen since 20 years since I left the family. I didn't know that actually that the family had that still have that love in me since I've been away for too long. It's a condition that people haven't the love that they still have in me, and that would make me cry.
I didn't think that I did enough to help these people, but hopefully in the future I will have more time to come and help them and try to figure out, try to train some other people. The nursing training that I went through, you give the patient the medicine and you stand there to see if the patient is taking the medicine, right? But that's the same to US. The US did help them to sign the peace, but to let them sign the peace and step back, it's like giving the patient medicine and walk away.
We have to listen to the elders, we have to listen to the children, we listen to mothers and ability to everybody. Their message is ringing in my mind, and it is now our responsibility. And that means here in this state, I have a lot of work to do.
So as these three young men, hello folks watching from home. As these three young men were preparing their trip and making these plans to go back, they had found out about the film that I had done previously in Darfur and asked if I would be willing to come with them and make a film about their journey. They had the foresight to know that having a film would help them in their goal of raising support for the school that they wanted to build and the wells that they wanted to drill and the clinic that they were supporting. And so rather than them being like subjects and me being a filmmaker, the four of us were partners. We were going together to make it a film, and the film was all about achieving those goals of the school, the clinic, and the wells. And so all of the proceeds of the film, of course, went directly to those guys' projects. And then I ended up going back to South Sudan. The first time filming, which was the basis of the film, was 2007. Went back with them again for follow-up visits as, filming, breaking ground on the school, filming, digging the first wells, filming, the work at the clinic happening. And that in so many ways became baked into the DNA. You were talking, Dean, about, what's baked into the DNA here in the Community Church of Boston. That ethic became baked into the DNA of how DonkeySaddle approaches its storytelling. Yes, we're trying to amplify stories of issues we care about, but at the center of all those issues are impacted humans. And we're centering the impacted humans and what they need, what they want, what they're telling us they need from us is at the center of all of the storytelling work that we do. And now Gabby's going to talk about how that has manifested in some of our other projects.
So I first got introduced to Jen and DonkeySaddle projects when Jen had developed a play called There Is a Field, which is now a film that we'll show a snippet of in a bit. But the play is about a 17-year-old boy named Silaseh who was murdered by Israeli police during a protest. And he himself had been a peace activist and kind of documents his life and his journey as a peace activist, but more so the play focused on his family after the loss of their son and their brother and what that looks like. And so what kind of really drew me to this play was the play toured, it kind of took two iterations. So one, it toured around the US, and then there were also residencies. So the residencies were developed by Black and Indigenous community members in specific locations who would work together for over the course of, I think it was a week, right?
Usually, yeah, somewhere between 5 to 6 days.
Okay. And so they would not just work on developing the performance together, but also really developed a community and those kind of organizing circles that came out of not just those that were participating in the play, but then the audiences that experienced that play still exists today. And it really did a phenomenal job of using this storytelling tool to bring together conversations on state violence in the US and in Palestine. And so my experience with the play when I saw it was that the play was touring at different historically Black colleges and universities in the US, and I saw it at Bowie State, which is, I'm from DC. And it was kind of the conversation on intersectional organizing was not new at that point, but we were getting past this point of like, the first iteration of organizing when I was, when I first started was the idea of solidarity. And then we moved into this idea of intersectional organizing. And now, this play, not that you started this concept, but the time around this play is going around to now has seen this shift of, it's not just intersectional organizing, it's like actually the idea this is one struggle. We have different contexts, we have different narratives, but state violence is represented in Palestine, in the US, by the same institutions that are affecting all of us. And that idea of provides like we were talking about this earlier today, but a really interesting basis to build power. Like it's beyond I need to go to other people who also experience different issues and are also oppressed and go to their events, they can come to our events. No, we move past that to we are building power together. We see these as one broader issue. And again, we have different contexts where the idea is not to erase that. I do not, as a Palestinian, have the same experience as a Black person in the United States, clearly, but there are the same institutions. The money is coming from the same places. What a cycle of oppression looks very similar, and we can build off of that and build one movement. And so There Is a Field did a really beautiful job of creating those moments to kind of break that down and look at that and build pockets of that power. And yeah, I'm going to have us show a clip.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Just one thing to add before we show the clip. So Gabby was talking about the tour and the residencies, and then we essentially we made a film from one of the residencies. So it was activists and artists in the movement for Black Lives who were performing the story of a Palestinian family whose son had been murdered by Israeli police. And the film itself goes back and forth between them performing the story, actual footage of the events when this young man, Asir Asleh, was murdered by the Israeli police, and then also the activists' reflections on the connections and the parallels they see. So the film kind of weaves those threads together.
I got really excited about the plane. We forgot about the film.
Okay. And this will be about like, again, around a 6 or 7 minute clip, I think 7. Hi, Charlie, Susan, and the other person watching. Happy that you're with us. And just to set up, this is the play and the film comes primarily from the perspective of Asil's older sister, Nardine. She's the main character. So this is the moment she knew her brother was shot and injured. She had learned that much, and she's on her way back home. And this is the moment she discovered what actually happened.
Used to flow around.
Is it? There it is.
Mustafa, give me a break, he's dead.
No, the situation is difficult, but
Mustafa, spare me.
he's not dead, he's just seriously injured.
We'll be home in 15 minutes and I'll know the truth. We get home. I get out of the car. I don't even look back to tell Mustafa, I told you so. Nardine. They killed your best friend.
Because we live in America, a world full of white privilege, and as Black people in the hood, these things happen, the cameras come, I mean, when everything dies down, they go, you know? So we live in a bubble where we really truly feel sometimes that we're alone in our struggles, you know? And then you read this play about a 17-year-old kid halfway across the world that's gone through the exact same thing, a family that's gone through the exact same thing that Trayvon Martin's family is going through, that Michael Brown's family is going through. And it's like, wow. Like just, wow, this is a 17-year-old kid getting killed by, again, people who are paid to supposedly protect you and keep order and all this other BS.
One of my little brothers, he was a victim of being shot in a Post nightclub in Orlando. He was shot maybe 3 times in one of his legs and twice in his other leg. So it really, that hit home with me the first time we read it. Just the gun violence alone. This time it didn't hit me as hard. It felt more like an episode of The Fresh Prince that I've seen a few times already. It was just like, okay, we know this story. You know what I mean? And which that realization hit me hard. Because then it's just like, now we're being desensitized to this.
I find Siwad inside the house. When Siwad was 2, she had this big curly hair. I don't know what she did to piss you off, but you put this battery-operated car on her head, and you drove it back and forth till it stuck in her hair.
Asir's classmate showed up late in the morning. I was surprised to see him. He hadn't visited in a long time. I woke Asir up.
Asir was Nardine's friend, but is in your room. He's just sitting on your bed, crying very quietly.
We were playing Mortal Kombat together yesterday to see who break the record. But he left this morning and I asked him to give me a game for the computer.
Nardine's friend is
I
dead.
didn't know where they were going. I didn't bother to wonder.
Why did he leave without saying anything? What if he never comes back? Who will help me with my homework? Who will help me with the computer?
My head hurts so much.
Somebody give me something to kill this headache.
Somebody gives me something. I don't remember who. I don't know what kind of pills. I take the pills and try to sleep. There are so many people in the house, aunts and uncles. We sleep in the living room, putting mattresses on the floor. Dad sleeps outside on the porch, if he sleeps at all.
I didn't take him out of the demonstration. I didn't take him home. I was just a few meters away from him and I couldn't do anything.
I've never seen Dad like this before.
Oh my God. What if Dad falls apart? Who's going to protect me then? Dad is the strongest person I know. Flashback.
Hey Nardine, Tom and Jerry is on.
Nardine joins the seal, laughing over Tom and Jerry.
Why do you spend your whole day in front of the TV watching cartoons? When I was in prison, I read thousands of books. I would wake up at 6 in the morning and work, do some sports, discipline. Prison taught me discipline.
I might never have known what Dad experienced in prison if you hadn't started asking him once we got older.
The hardest part was the first few months. The rest was a period of interrogation when I was in the hands of the Shabbat, the security agency. They had many tools to torture us, punching, beating with sticks, tying my arms in the chair with the interrogator sitting on the table, pushing his foot into intimate places, electric hat, very painful shock.
How did you stay strong?
I don't know. I was 18 years old, a strong boy. And I said, let them do anything they want. I will not break. 5 years and 2 months in prison.
Why didn't you ever tell us this before?
I didn't want to plant hate inside of you.
So aren't you angry at them?
Be proud as Palestinians. Be proud as human beings. Freedom of one group never comes at the expense of another's freedom.
I miss the mornings Dad walked with us through Arabi.
I spent my childhood in this village, playing marbles, setting traps for birds. I worked the land with my father. In those days, you cannot leave the village by permission from the Israeli military administration. You see those farmlands over there? Agricultural subsidies were given to help the Jewish farms and destroy the Arab ones. In order to work their fields, you had to change your name to a Jewish name. I was called Yafet. Nadine, Asil, always remember.
Hassan scoops up a handful of soil and places it into their hands.
You are the roots of this land. You are the trees, the stones, the soil.
Dad's love for us, it's like that Khalil Gibran poem he read us.
Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life. Every father loves his son. Every father loves his daughter. But the highest level of love towards your children is to love you as Khalil Gibran described. To love you enough to let you live your lives. There's a park near my house. And when my grandkids come to visit, they naturally always want to go to the park or to the library. And we walk to the park. Just about without fail, I think of Tamir Wright, the little kid that was shot down in the park by the police. Those things, and I can't really explain it, but yeah, to just lose a child, it's just this whole playing and to just play Hassan and have to embody that loss is difficult.
So something that I mentioned that with the play, we were able to kind of develop this really interactive community moment that lived beyond just us being in a room together and watching the play. And the film came out about end of 2020, right? October 2020. And as Jen and I continued to do screenings throughout 2021, we realized that we felt like the model of here's the film and then afterwards we'll do a discussion Q&A had lost some of that piece that developed a deeper sense of community and kind of delved into the themes of, is this on? Oh, there we go. And delved into the themes of the play a bit more deeply. And we also kind of went through a process of critically looking at the film, and we received some feedback from Palestinian community members who had some very justified critiques on some of the points that we were trying to make, and that potentially needed to be clarified a little bit more. And so we developed, kind of went into two directions with the film. One is that we actually did several edits and released a second version of the film that highlighted some of those points a bit more poignantly. And the second was that we yesterday debuted our workshop format for using this film as a part of a conversation on state violence. So rather than the film being the absolute focus and then having a question and answer like we've been doing throughout the year, we've had people, audience members mostly view the first half or so on their own, and then we watch the remainder together, and we're able to delve into those discussions a little bit more through smaller groups and a little bit more conversation. We also realized the virtual aspect had been part of what had kind of lost a little bit of that community touch. But I say all of this to kind of highlight that what we find really important is that these stories don't just get put out there and then left alone, that they are living, breathing stories and tools that we can use. And they're also living, breathing stories of people who still exist, who have changed and the context has changed. And so we are accountable to that and to that narrative. And so it is important that we continue to like critically look at our work and make those adjustments and be accountable to the movement that we're trying to uplift and highlight. And that we also continue to look at really creative ways to embed what we produce into our community work so that it is as effective and it's not just this thing that we've created and then we hope that it gets enjoyed and that's amazing and that's moved by it, but more that it does have a purpose in terms of centering these conversations. And I think that's really an important part of storytelling is to be able to use that narrative in a strong way to keep that story alive and keep that alive in a way that continues ongoing conversations rather than just kind of letting it be this moment in history and releasing it.
Yeah, so I'm just
Okay.
Just building on what Gabby was saying, that these are real people. These stories are not just a moment in time, and the humans whose stories are being amplified are also real people that weren't just a snapshot in time, right? And that still exists today, and that we are accountable to them. And so many of the family members that I've met that have been impacted by injustice and that have lost loved ones to horrible, oppressive acts of injustice. In their struggle for justice, there's many elements to that, right? That's not a simple question about what does justice mean and what does justice in the face of state violence look like. But two of the things that I found consistently across many different families in multiple contexts that they're seeking in the struggle for justice, one is accountability, and another is truth telling, that their truth be known. And especially if the perpetrator of the violence is the state and the mechanisms to seek justice are also controlled by the state, what are the chances that you're going to get either accountability or the true narrative out there? And so one of the things that I feel like we're able to provide when we partnered, there's a field grew out of a 15-year partnership with Asil's sister Nardine, 15 years of interviews that became the basis of the play and then the film. And one of the things that I felt like we were doing, I didn't have the language for this at the time, but it was providing an alternative form of justice. We can make sure we can partner together and we can make sure that that your narrative, that your family's narrative is out there, is being told, is being elevated and amplified. And another theme that I've seen from so many impacted family members who've lost loved ones is wanting that nothing's going to bring their loved one back. The word closure is bullshit. There's no such thing as closure, and that pain is never going to go away. It's never going to be undone, and it can bring some comfort to those families if they feel that their loved one continues to have an impact, and the legacy of that loved one's life continues to live on. And that's another thing that we can that we try to provide in the kinds of storytelling that we do. There's a field as one example of that. I am Troy Davis is another example of that. Troy Davis was an innocent man on death row in Georgia who was ultimately executed by the state of Georgia in 2011. And I first encountered Troy, actually connecting it to the Rebuilding Hope film. I was deep in editing. I just come back from South Sudan, was editing the film in 2007, watching Democracy Now!, and saw this amazing woman talk on Democracy Now! About the fact that her brother had just narrowly averted being killed by the state of Georgia. This was 2007. It was Troy's, what I learned was Troy's first execution date, that 36 hours before the state of Georgia had scheduled its murder of Troy, that execution had been stopped. And here was Troy's sister, Martina, clearly the force of nature, talking about her family's struggle to demonstrate Troy's innocence and their struggle against the death penalty. And then Martina talked about simultaneously how she'd been struggling. At that point, she had been diagnosed 6 years ago with breast cancer, and at the time of her diagnosis, she had been given 6 months to live. So now she was 6 years past that diagnosis, fighting like hell to survive so that she could raise her son. She was the single mom of a little boy who had been 6 years old when she was diagnosed. So she wanted to raise her son, and she wanted to free her brother. And I was so moved by this incredible woman that I started researching Troy's case, found an address for him in prison. We began corresponding. He suggested to me that I might make a film about Martina because he wasn't thinking of himself, he was thinking of his family. And then I ended up meeting Martina. She came out to Seattle where I live for a speaking event, and we had dinner, and she mentioned that everyone keeps telling her she should write a book. She would love to write a book, but she doesn't have time. Like, she would need someone to work with to write this book. And I don't think she even knew that I was her. She just knew I was Troy's friend. But I couldn't get that out of my mind. And I reached out to her afterwards and said, would you like me to be that person? I would be so honored and privileged to partner with you in that. And so we began working on the book in the years that led up to ultimately what became Troy's execution. He survived 3 execution dates before the state of Georgia was finally successful in murdering him. And in 2011, Troy was killed. Martina passed away 2 months later. She outlived her prognosis by 10 years, but ended up passing away 2 months after her brother was murdered. And then I was left with really what I considered the absolute sacred obligation to make sure that their story got finished, that their book, that Troy and Martina's book got finished. And that book, which became called I Am Troy Davis, came out in the world in 2013, and Troy and Martina's younger sister, Kimberly, last time I saw her was when Kimberly and I were talking at Georgetown in DC. We brought that book into the world in deep partnership with the family. And then in 2019, the Trump administration made their announcement that they intended to resume federal executions after a 17-year hiatus. And I called Kim to talk about, how can we respond, what can we do, and we kind of concocted this idea of taking Troy's story and making a performance of it. A screenplay already existed of that the book had been adapted into, and that could be a theatrical protest to the death penalty, to the resumption of executions, of federal executions. But as we're talking about the idea, it became very clear that we should, my first thought was we'll get a room full of actors and we'll get an audience and we'll do it and it'll be very powerful. And then it became clear, no, the people who need to be telling Troy's story, the people who have the right to tell Troy's story, it's not actors. It's folks who have been most directly impacted by not only the death penalty, but if you look at the death penalty as the sharp edge of a whole system of state violence, and that system of state violence includes capital punishment and police killings, police murders, wrongful incarceration, lynchings, racial violence, state-sanctioned murders. Then you begin to look at the death penalty not just as its own siloed egregious human rights violation, but the sharp edge of a much larger system of state violence. And so that's what we did. We ended up bringing together an incredible group of some of the most fierce and unbelievable warriors for justice that I ever had the opportunity to meet, who performed Troy's story in New York City. And we had the chance to film the performance and film the workshops and the rehearsals leading up to it. And when I say a room full of the most incredible warriors, I mean, and you'll see, because we'll show you a segment, a couple minute segment of the film in a moment, but being in the room with people like Erica Gordon-Taylor, who is the cousin of Emmett Till, who performed as Martina, and Uncle Bobby Johnson, who is the the uncle of Oscar Grant, who was murdered by Bay Area Rapid Transit Police at a BART station in 2009, and he performed as Troy. Their mom, Troy Martinez's mom, Virginia, performed by Gwen Carr, who's the mother of Eric Garner, who was murdered by New York police in Staten Island as they suffocated him in a illegal chokehold, as he said 11 times, "I can't breathe," which was, quite eerily also repression of the murder of George Floyd 6 years later. And these were all family members who not only were there because they had lost their loved ones in horrific circumstances of state violence, but because they were fighting, and they were fighting in their loved one's name, and they were fighting powered by the love they had for their family members. So the tremendous honor it was to be able to be in a room together with those warriors, with Troy's story being the platform on which they were all connecting with each other, and sharing and drawing strength from each other, and connecting the dots between, there was 3 death row exonerees who performed in this. There were 2 people who had brothers who were currently on death row who performed in it, and making those connections that the same violence that took Eric Gardner from his mom, Gwen Carr, was the same violence that Suja Graham, death row exoneree, had suffered from. That it was all part and parcel of the same system, and that we needed to join together to bring down that system and to envision a new and better and just and liberatory system. So we're gonna show now a segment of that project, which is I think about 6 minutes, and then we'll have some time for discussion and questions. Hi, Susan. Hi, Charlie. We lost one person.
I'm right here.
Hi, you got here. Excellent.
Just monitoring from.
Oh, amazing.
Humanitarian crisis with food, water, fuel, and medical supplies running out as forces loyal to toppled leader Muammar Gaddafi attempt to hold off interim government troops, but stopped short early Monday as rebels began to fire on the town. Thousands of people packed the Jonesville Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia, Saturday for the funeral of Troy Anthony Davis. The state of Georgia executed Davis last month for the murder of a police officer, despite widespread doubt about his guilt. 7 of the 9 witnesses who originally testified against Davis later recanted or changed their testimony. Speakers at Saturday's funeral included Benjamin Jealous, president of the NAACP.
Troy's last words that night where he told us to keep on fighting. Keep on fighting till his name is finally cleared and Georgia admits what Georgia has done.
Martinez, the main hall where hundreds of reporters and journalists are gathered. Benjamin hands her the microphone. The mic exchanges feedback as the room quiets. Troy said that this fight did not begin with him, and this movement should not end with him. Because if we can amass millions of people to stand up and say, we will not stand for this, then we can end the death penalty. Now, I've been battling cancer for 10 years, but the effects of chemo have taken their toll. Several months ago, I was doing fine. And after that, I couldn't get up out of this chair. But I'm here to tell you. I'm here to tell you. That I'm going to stand here for my brother today. Mama, thank you. Martina slowly, unsteadily rises from her chair. Dejan and Master try to help. She darts them a fearsome stare. They stare back. No matter what happens tonight,
There are rumors of a stake. The crowd is in a frenzy.
I just received the orders, and I want to be clear.
It says that Troy has not been executed yet, but that there is also not confirmation of a stay.
This is not a stay. The U.S. Supreme Court has asked for a temporary delay as they review the case.
So we are waiting and you don't know whether we're here for a miracle or a shoot.
But for the moment, Troy is with us. We are in a holding pattern.
Thank you, family, and welcome. My name is Sherelle. I'm in this space because I think the death penalty is the sharpest edge of the prison industrial complex. Troy Davis was also the case that radicalized me when I was in college. He's the reason why I do this work today.
You gotta retire. You don't retire from social justice activities. As long as there's injustice, we gotta fight to go over.
It just goes to show just how important that we must stay in this battle to bring about real systemic change.
I'm here to give my all, and I'm sure everyone else here is, and let's do it.
I Am Troy Davis by Philip Montgomery, based on the book by Jen Marlowe and Martina Davis Correa and Troy Anthony Davis. Act 1, Scene 1, September 21st, 2011, 11:08 p.m.
So also, if there are moments as we look through the script today where we missed one of the characters, we'll adjust that in the moment, but hopefully this is everything. It's like 62 speaking parts. All right, whenever you're ready.
So John is supposed to be a blonde hair guy, right? Is that right? Is that right?
I didn't shoot any police officer.
Martina studies her brother. All right. Martina leads her brother to the backseat.
Six from both shootings show similar casings, and we believe they were fired from the same gun.
So right now, I want you to sit with all the things that we've talked about today. What's on your spirit or your heart? Anger, sadness, fear.
So my name is Cheryl Brown. I'm a community organizer. Been working around anti-Black state violence for about a little more than a decade. I was radicalized by Troy Davis' execution that happened in 2011. I was a student organizer at the time.
So that's just you know, a little teaser, a little segment of, that's still very much a work in progress. Actually, I was telling you, we did a shoot in Jacksonville yesterday, and it was with one of the gentlemen, the father of Ron Davis, who's the father of Jordan Davis. I don't know if you remember Jordan's story in Jacksonville. Jordan Davis was a 17-year-old teenager who was shot and killed in a gas station in Jacksonville because he and his friends were listening to loud music. And the shooter apparently felt that the music was too loud and started a fight with the kids and ended up shooting into the car. And Jordan was hit and killed. And so Jordan's father, Ron, in Jacksonville, I'm looking at Pierre because he just moved to Boston from Jacksonville a year ago, was in many ways the heart and soul of this project. So we just did a follow-up interview with him for this film. First time I directed film shoot over Zoom. So this is still very much a work in progress, was my point. And I would love, now that you've had a little bit of a sense of the work that we do, and most importantly, the motivation for that work and the philosophy undergirding that work, we would love just to open it up, whether it's comments, questions, thoughts, reflections. We have an intimate space and the chance to have conversation together. And for Susan and Charlie, if you want to come off Zoom and if you have a question or something you want to contribute, please do, or if you do the little hand raising icon, we'll try to keep our eye on the screen to make sure that you're a part of the conversation as well. Oh, yes, okay, so then it wasn't Charlie we lost, there's someone else that we lost. Sorry, so Susan. Thoughts or comments or questions, anything that struck you in particular or left you?
So where is the Troy Davis project now? You're still working on it. What more has to be done? How long will it take, and what will you do when it's finished?
Thank you. Those are great questions. What more needs to be done is we're in the process of trying to do follow-up filming with a number of the impacted family members, because we filmed the whole process, we filmed the performance, but wanted to be able to go back and have those reflective conversations where they could talk about what the whole experience meant to them. And a lot of people spoke to us about how it impacted their own journey of healing. So there's something about, not only being in a room together with other impacted family members, but that the actual process opened up a space of vulnerability that allowed them to be with each other in a way that was quite different than when they had been at other conferences or, spoken on panels together or things like that. And so we want to really learn about the impact that it has on them. And I think, we have so many hopes and dreams for the project once it's done, primarily is wanting, and we're an abolitionist organization. And I think Troy's story is one of the most powerful examples of why not only the death penalty needs to be abolished, but again, the death penalty as part and parcel of the whole system of state violence, which includes incarceration, which includes policing, which includes so many aspects of how the state tries to control, and particularly communities of color. And so if the film can help make that point, and can help bring that kind of political education and stimulate those discussions and conversations, then I think not only will that be extremely important, but I feel like it will absolutely be serving Troy's legacy and Martina's legacy. The question about when it's going to be done, to be quite honest, that's a conversation about funding. Quite frankly, at the moment, we have used all the funding that we have raised for that project to get to the point where we are now, and we can't move forward until we get more resources. And so, we'd be happy for folks to let us know if you have ideas or thoughts or suggestions on places to find that, because this project needs to move forward, but it needs resources to do that.
I thought it was really powerful, the sight of a bunch of African American actors playing the parts of Palestinian people, and it'd be really interesting to see a bunch of Palestinian actors playing the part of African Americans, victims of what that poster shows, all the young Black men who have been killed, and bringing that intersectionality between those two horrible issues up front. We have one speaker named Curry Peterson Smith, who has done a lot. He's spoken here 3 or 4 times, and I lift up his name when I think of those two topics together. And so I just thank you for that.
Thank you.
I just want to actually plug Curry is one of the co-founders of an organization called Black for Palestine that does really amazing work, co-founded with several other organizers. They just, I would recommend looking them up if you are familiar with their work. And
they're in DC now, right? They're no longer in Boston, I think.
Curry, yeah, yes.
Is that true?
I believe so, yeah.
Last I saw them,
We still.
Don't they still live in Dorchester?
No? I think now they're in DC, but that was also a couple of years ago, so things might have, this was pre-pandemic.
He also happens to have been my son's 8th grade school teacher in a previous life.
That's amazing. Some of the most amazing radical organizers I know are educators.
Thanks so much, Jen and Gabrielle. It's really
and for all of your work. You kind of started by talking about how these are all. You kind of started by talking about how these are all human-centered stories, and I know, Jen, for you, many of them are relationships that you developed over, decades at this point. So how does that impact the work, and kind of I guess also a question of like what projects are in the pipeline, or how do those projects come to you? It's, as you've said, it's very organic because it's led by those voices. And you have this really interesting story of how the book with I Am Troy Davis came about. But yeah, so kind of what's coming up, and how are you now in a phase of kind of re-looking at those projects? Gabrielle, you talked about the work that you were doing on I Am a Field, and like responding to some comments and about that. So yeah, I guess where are these projects now, and maybe a little bit about where they're going, or will there be new projects? That was clear.
10 questions in one.
Yeah, my usual.
Yeah, do you want to talk about your assessment already?
Okay.
Well,
we had the same idea.
yeah. Sorry, I have a loud voice. I don't need that. So one of the audience members for one of the There Is a Field performances was she performed in it.
She performed as an idea.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought okay, so one of the actresses is a woman named Alejandra Pablos, who was held in ICE detention and under threat of deportation for a very extended period of time.
She's been fighting her deportation for 10 years, 2.5 years of that she was in ICE detention. Wow.
And so through her experience with There Is a Field, she approached Jen and the DonkeySaddle team about, hey, I would really love to do a similar process for developing a play around my story. And so Jen, Alejandra, and several other of our creative partners have been developing a play called Yo Te Esperaba, I Was Waiting for You. And it documents her story. And so we kind of see how each of our projects kind of end up leading into very organically other ones. We also, our DonkeySaddle expanded pretty dramatically between the end of 2020 and beginning of 2021. It went from 2 staff members with like a lot of creative partners to now we have 5.5 staff members. And so we've also been kind of looking at, you saw Rel for a second, who's talking about Troy's execution being kind of the impetus for a lot of her involvement in organizing. Both Rel and I don't have as creative backgrounds. We are longtime organizers. And so looking at what does that look like in terms of the direction we go in. Rel leads our abolition organizing against the death penalty. And so we are kind of looking at different ways that we can reimagine the ways that DonkeySaddle can institutionalize and develop and utilize those strengths in the communities that we bring with us and have worked with. And do you mind if I kind of share what that looks like? So right now we're kind of looking at developing basically 2 departments that work together and continue to feed into each other's work, but do have different strategies. So we have like a art and storytelling department, and then we'll have a organizing that does grassroots, grasstops, and advocacy organizing. That would be more focused around Rel and I's work, and then the art side would be focused around our other team members, BK, Heather, and Jen's strengths. And so looking at the different ways that we can really start leveraging some of the work that we've done and the work that we're actively involved in towards building power and building more momentum towards change in different ways.
And again, I think all of that work is whether we're talking about more direct organizing or the artistic project, it's all grounded in this idea of like accountability to folks who are most impacted. And so those, like you referenced, those decades-long relationships, like that is the work, right? And I don't mean that like, oh, it's my job to have those relationships. I don't mean it in that way, but we don't parachute in and parachute out. It's not like hit and run storytelling or hit and run activism. These are long-term commitments to people, to places, and long-term commitments liberation and to the struggles that will bring liberation for for the folks who are most impacted. And so I just one if I can add one detail about the Yote Esparaba, like Gabby was saying, we met Ali because she was performing in staged readings of There Is a Field, but I find it really meaningful to add that it was staged readings that were being organized as fundraisers for the Black Mama Bailout Fund that was being hosted by Black Youth Project 100 in DC. So through these staged readings that were hosted in people's living rooms and like community centers, each of these staged readings were fundraisers, and they ended up raising enough money to bail 6 Black mothers out of jail. It was also a protest against the cash bail system altogether. And then then we had a performance at the Kennedy Center as part of their From Page to Stage New Works Festival, where 3 formerly incarcerated women, 2 of whom had been bailed out from the funds we raised, performed the play. Ali was one of them. Ali was not bailed out from the funds for the play. She was the 3rd formerly incarcerated, she'd been detained by ICE, who performed. And so she really experienced how Asil's family story was like literally being leveraged to bring people home from Pages. And so when she approached us to say, hey, how can we do something like that? How could my story be mobilized in a similar way? And that began that partnership.
Where did your name DonkeySaddle come from?
Oh, no, you're right. That's all you. Nothing to do with that.
What we usually tell people is that donkeys can reach the hard to reach places. And we, as an organization, our commitment is to reach not only geographically the hard to reach places, but making sure that the stories are being heard that people have a hard time hearing for all kinds of reasons why it's hard to reach us, hard to reach places inside of us, and so that was where DonkeySaddle comes from. In reality, it was my email address for a long time, and when we were making the South Sudan film, and the editor was really said, "Oh, you need a production name like Jen Marlowe Productions," and we were like, "Oh, I'm not gonna call it Jen Marlowe Productions." She's like, "I don't know, DonkeySaddle Productions," because she knew my email address, and then it's like, "Oh, DonkeySaddle Projects." That not productions, because we're not just a film company. But anyway, so that's the actual story, but but there, there's the donkey provides inspiration for the reasons I said. Yeah.
I would just love to hear more about the project, the film that you said you filmed in Bethesda in 2014, and how, were you literally there asking questions, or who was asking questions? Was somebody interpreting for you? What was the process like to kind of get people's stories? And also, how did you, if it was after 2014, how did you manage the trauma aspect of people, not being not being invasive in trying to get people's stories, and just kind of respecting where people were at? Or yeah.
Can you just repeat the question because I think I'm afraid that the people on line may not have heard that.
Sure. So thank you very much. What's your name? Raisa, thank you so much for that question, Raisa. Raisa was asking, because Gabby had referenced some filming I had done in Gaza shortly after the 2014 assault, and was asking about, sort of logistically how that was managed in terms of translation and all those elements. But then also, I think, and much, very importantly, when people have been through such deep and such profound trauma, how to do this work in a way that is trauma informed. And you didn't say I'm paraphrasing, but in a way where and I'm so glad you asked that question. And first, let me say that I filmed in Gaza. That was the Remembering the Gaza War film series that Gabby was referencing was 6 months after the 2014 assault. It was early 2015 when I was there. But I've been to Gaza dozens of times in the past 20 years, and I've been there freshly after multiple of the Gaza assaults, and I've done numerous filming work in Gaza. And I'm always struggling with what you talked about in terms of wanting to make sure first of all, like the do no harm principle, because there can be, and I think that's one of the reasons why it feels so important to me to emphasize how we do, how we, for us, the storytelling is centering, the people who are most impacted, because I think there can be, even if it's unintentional, there can be something extractive in this work. And this idea of like you're parachuting in, you're finding a powerful story, you're filming it, you're parachuting out, and then half the time the folks who open their lives and their trauma for, never even know what happened to the story, or they don't have any agency in what is told or how it's told. Even without intending to be, even with the best intentions, you can be part of something that can be extracted, and that's something that we always try to be really keenly aware of. I don't have any like, and here's how we'll avoid it. Here's that, except for just like, to me, what feels like the most basic thing of like following what people say they want, and what they need. And what one thing that I have found is, so often people, they want to tell the story of what they went through. They want their suffering, they want their loss to be able to have some kind of impact. But at the same time, like, you can capitalize upon that for your project, right? So you want it, so this whole idea of like truly trying to develop, and I think that's where the relationships that Maura was talking about, like every single one of the families who you see in this Remembering the Gaza War series, like I am still in touch with them all, now 6 years later, and they've had opportunities to, for the work that we've done to meet particular needs that, that they have, whether it's like their kindergarten being rebuilt, or whether, material needs or other kinds of needs, just staying in relationship with folks so that, like no one's subjects of a film, right? And there's never been a time that we've asked ourselves, like, well, what's our next film going to be about? Or what's the next book going to be about? And going out and seeking a story or seeking a subject. It's always being confronted by a situation in front of us, seeing, human suffering, and then asking, like, do we have tools that will be useful for you? And there are times when it's like, we can bring to the table the possibility of something with filming. We can bring to the table something with the possibility of writing. Sometimes when it discovers like the most important thing that needs to be written is a press release, and that, and so then, all right, so we write a press release because that's what folks are asking for. That's what folks need. So I don't have like a clear and concise answer, because it's a huge question without a like, a spoon-fed like answer, but it's one that's like, that question is at the heart of what we grapple with doing this work, and the heart of what we want to make sure that we aren't doing this in a way that is extractive or exploitative.
And I will say, I think that is the degree to which that's not the case in overwhelmingly in this work, and I feel like especially in journalism and in a lot of creative offerings that do exist, putting ego at the door is like almost impossible in this movement. And so I do think that it seems like, oh, we don't have an answer, but this is one option. That's actually like really important and seemingly really hard for a lot of people. And I would love to know why, but the idea that you are here to uplift somebody else, like you are not here for yourself. You're not here to build up your resume or to sit there and be able to tell your friends like, oh my God, I heard this horrible story and that my heart was just broken. Like, no, you're actually here in service of a family or a community. That is something that is so rare, and I think it's really important to be centered, and I just want to highlight that it really rarely happens, and so I would love to see more of that as everyone moves through organizing spaces. Yeah.
And to us, it feels like, I guess some of the reason I say it so hesitantly is because, like, even though I sort of know that it's rare because so many people told me, like, you realize that's really rare, it's sort of like, but it's so obvious. Like to us, it's just like, of course it's how you do work. It's of course you approach, it's not projects, it's partnerships, it's humans, it's lives, and these are tools that we can offer if people want, if those tools fill needs that they have. And if they don't, then, you don't do it. Or if they think that they do, but then they change your mind, it doesn't, I've had projects where I've, invested, hours and hours and hours and like I did, a whole film that I made, the Bahrain film, Witness Bahrain, if we didn't see a part of it. But like after making an entire feature-length documentary film, the woman who was like I partnered most deeply with, the Bahraini activist, started to have like jitters about it being released widely for safety reasons, and some of the other activists in the films who at the time of the filming had agreed, but the situation on the ground had changed, and now they were getting nervous. And we had conversations and made the decision that we would not release the film publicly. We would do sort of closed invite-only screenings so that the film could still have, some impact and be seen, but it wouldn't be available for streaming. It wouldn't be out in the world in that way. And that means we didn't get a distribution deal. That this distributor, there was a distributor ready to make a distribution deal. That didn't matter, right? What mattered was that the people who were in the film, their safety was what mattered. It didn't matter that I had release forms from them. I legally could have released them, you know what I mean? But like that what was important was centering what they wanted in their safety, and that had changed. And it, and that means that we had to change what we were doing in relationship to that.
There's also the part about logistics in the as far as translation.
Oh, yeah, so I do, sorry, thank you. I dear friends, cousins who are amazing and just to help me with all of that. And that's both like, I speak enough Arabic that I can sometimes conduct interviews on my own, like knowing that I'm not here understanding everything that's happening, but I can get all the footage translated after. So I had friends who were both helping with that post, translating the footage, but then also whenever possible are with me on the ground, and helping to facilitate, because my Arabic, my Arabic is absolutely terrible. So yeah, right, friends, a whole network of support of friends in Gaza, folks I've known for decades, and colleagues who work with us, and our colleague Fadi, who works with me most closely in Gaza, is also the one on the ground implementing all of the work that we've done with with providing medical care for kids who we've documented their story in Gaza, rebuilding the kindergarten. He coordinates all of that on the ground.
Should anybody be moved to make a donation to DonkeySaddle projects, tonight's event is going to be split and primarily go to that Palestine grassroots distribution project that she just discussed.
Go ahead.
And also real quick, before Dean goes in, I'm going to pass around this for folks who want to stay in touch with us. You can just go to donkeysaddle.org and on your phone and sign up for our email list, or you can also just give your information on this sheet.
This is becoming a community church pattern or theme. You mentioned filmmakers who were scared of their stuff getting out there. 2 weeks ago, we had Michael Sheridan, who teaches documentary filmmaking in some pretty donkey saddle places, like Afghanistan was what he featured 2 weeks ago. And we had to go in and he had to edit out one of the filmmakers who's still in Afghanistan, just because of that same security reasons. And you mentioned Gaza. 13 months ago, we screened Abby Martin's film that's called Gaza Fights for Freedom. And it was sort of the same thing. Videographers right on the ground during the Great March of Return, filming these horrific things, and trying to get it out of there. And finally, they got it out of there. And Abby edited it into something that has recently been deplatformed by YouTube. As has all of Abby's work on RT, and same with another speaker at Community Church, Chris Hedges, deplatformed off YouTube. I wonder if we're next. Who knows?
I actually just want, there's one other element to your question that I realized I started to address, and then I started talking about not wanting to be extractive, and that's also about like the trauma. And again, I'm not I'm not trained in like trauma work, but I think we have as a team, DonkeySaddle, we sort of developed a lot of, I guess the trauma informed, instincts I would call, and I think sitting with people and listening deeply, and how, what I have found is that like even if regardless of the camera being there or not, sometimes what I feel is the most important thing that I can offer is being with people in their pain, and just like deeply in it with them. And yes, we're documenting it, and yes, we're documenting it to try to amplify it, but that separate from that, like being there, and then I think that idea of then like the follow-up in the relationship, so that then so that then those folks realize that like to us they're not a story, right? They're full humans with and humans that we care about. And so I don't know if that provides any healing or not. I also know that there is a price people pay for opening up their trauma to talk about it, even when they're choosing to, and even when they want to, because they want to have that impact. So yeah, it's I'm acknowledging the complexity of that, but wanted to answer that part more fully.
Since you're splitting the proceeds, and you did it a little bit, if you could update any like very recent updates from the projects and work in Gaza.
Actually, yeah, let me hear. I can actually play a little phone clip that is related to that. But would you want to?
What I was going to ask is that earlier you mentioned about financial challenges to finish this program and stuff like that. It's the first time I heard about this.
Oh, let me pass that to this here.
Okay, I was saying that you mentioned about the financial challenges. That's right. So how can people contribute? Do you have like a website or where people can donate? So collecting the funds to actually.
You are very useful, sir.
That was not a plan.
It's these little things.
So right there on the screen, if you see DonkeySaddle.org/donate, gives you all the different ways online. If folks here are here who want to write a check, there's a direct method, just a check to DonkeySaddle Projects, a tax deductible method, which is to our fiscal sponsor, Fractured Atlas, and then DonkeySaddle.org/donate gives you all the online ways to do that. And thank you so much, sir, for picking up on it.
And it's really easy to donate online.
Thank you.
I unfortunately have to catch a flight, but it's been really lovely to meet all of you. And yeah, my contact information is also on the website if anybody has any questions. Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, I wanted, if folks have a minute, I was just answering Laura's question. I have one other short video actually that I hadn't intended to show here, but addresses that. So there's two little boys who I think that might be the young man you're talking about that we've been in relationship with for years and years. Met these two little guys in the course of our the journalism that I was doing in Gaza. One is a little boy named Abdullah, who has a rare chest and lung disorder. The other is a little boy named Mohammed, who was shot in the leg by an Israeli sniper as he was participating in the Great March of Return. And again, this is an example of how we, believe that it's important not to just sort of parachute in, tell the story and parachute out. We've stayed in touch with these two kids and with their families for years and years now. Abdullah since 2014 and Mohammed since 2019. Funding their medical care. And so I'll show you just a short little video of these two guys talking about that and getting a sense of what it takes for kids in Gaza to have medical care when so often, because of the situation in Gaza being under siege, they can't get the care they need in Gaza. And the Israeli military controls whether or not they can get out of Gaza, so often denying them their permission. So we're also advocating for them and trying to connect with human rights organizations so that these kids can get the care that they need. And so let me just find this. So this gives a little sense of these guys.
So you got a birthday coming up, yeah? If you could have one dream for your birthday, what would you do?
اسمي محمد نبي جمال صالح، عمري 12 سنة. أسير في مسير العودة 15.
ما يبصر.
مقدرش أمشي، بتثني الحال هذا مشيت.
شرب منه والله شرود. مطعم البرندة كنت حزاء منعان يطلع من قبل هيك اتصور كنت بتغاز.
أيوه في الأدب.
صاب بطلق ناري قطع عنده أوردة وشرايين وفرد إنه عنده قطع في العصب بالكامل في رجله، لقيته هو بده زرعة عصب، عندنا فيش إمكانيات لزرعة العصب فحولوه على مستشفى المقاصد.
The fact that Palestinians in the Gaza Strip need to go to treatment in the West Bank or in East Jerusalem or even Israeli hospitals, it is because of the closure.
ثلاث مرات قدمنا مستشفى المقاصد تحويله ويجي رفض.
طلعت من الدار ضلت نصيح برا.
ليش كنت بالضبط تصيح؟
أنا ارتفضت جنبي، أنا وقت حامل دبابة وإيش حدا ما عملتش شيء كأي طفل طلعت هالسنة.
عندي كمان رسالة. يعني طفل بيجي رفض نفسي أعرف ليه، يعني واحد والله ما هو عارف. هاي عندك برضك هي مرتك هذه 17/2 رسالة محمد صالح تقرير طب جديد إنها صالح بالفحص 17/2 معدنا احنا نكون في 18/2 في مستشفى المقاصد لإجراء العملية. راح علينا هي 3 موعد للعملية ويروحنا علينا. هاي بنستنى موعد جديد إنه يرنوا علينا. فإحنا بدنا يعني يسعوا يستعجلوا إن هذا عملية زراعة العصب، لأنها كل ما تأخرت كل ما ساءت رجله، عنده العصب حيموت. حكت لي إنه ما عملش عملية العصب، عنده العصب حيموت وحتكون يعني عمليته حساسة جدا.
بقيت أحبها، بقيت كل يوم أروح وألعب مع أصحابي وألعب كورة، بس لقيت انحرمت.
أنا ابني معنا يعني لما ولد أخوته على المدرسة واحد بشيله العكاكيز وواحد بشيله الشنطة وواحد بشيله على كتافه، إنه الكهرباء اللي بتجي مش طبيعية، بتألم بالكهرباء، عنده العصب بضرب.
When you see the other kids going to school and you're not able to join, how does that feel?
بصيح بعدي.
أمي شهيد فاطمة أنا لما ابني بتألم كله بروح بنام في بيت وأنا اللي بسهر عليه، طب ليش ترفضوه؟ ليش ترفضوه؟ اليوم الوين؟ أنا في شو المقاصد عشان عملية عصب عصب
The first thing that we do is just to set a letter for the army with all the medical documents. We ask them to give them permits. If we are successful, then that's great. If not, then we go to the media or we take these petitions for the court.
And why do you want to be a doctor? عادي الأطفال اللي زيي. مرحبا، أنا اسمي عبد الله بكاش، عمري 13 سنة، أحب أشوف كل واحد ساعدني في السنة الماضية، واللون كما كنت عايش حتى الآن. شكرا.
Thanks. And so just an update since then, you saw that, you know, Physicians for Human Rights Israel were able to intervene so that Mohammed could finally get the nerve transplant surgery, but it was 6 months after his injury, and it's a very time sensitive operation. He's been denied permit after permit. So the surgery was unsuccessful. They tried another surgery a few months later. It was also unsuccessful. We don't know if had he gotten the permit and been able to have that surgery in a timely way. We don't know whether or not it would have been successful, but we know it would have had a better chance of being successful. And a couple months ago, the doctors made the assessment that Mohammed needed to have his leg amputated because there was not going to be a chance of it being able to be connected, and it was getting infections, and there's going to be other life-threatening medical problems. So his leg was amputated in October. He's still having some medical issues with it. The healing is, there's been some rough patches with the healing, but the hope is that it will allow him to get a prosthesis, and that he'll be able to walk and play soccer, which is what he really wants the most to do, is to play soccer with his friends. But it's been pretty, you know, he's a strong young man, and he's 16 now. He just turned 16, but it's also been very emotionally devastating to him to lose his leg, and that's the reality that we're dealing with Muhammad right now. So thank you for that question. I'm sorry to to end on this heavy note, but it's also, for me, there's no more compelling motivation to get up in the morning and continue to do the work that I do than when my Facebook Messenger rings, usually 3 times a day, with Mohammed, wanting to just talk and connect, and he's a kid with a bright smile and bright shining eyes, and who's loving and smart, and he's not, I guess this is also a part of the ethic of our work, right? He's not a leg injury. He's a child. He's not a symbol of oppression. He's a child, and he's a child whose future and life of dignity is why we have to fight with oppression. So I think that's. Thank you so much. Someone's coming up.
Thanks, everybody. For those of you who are here physically, we still have some lovely desserts over there. And if you want something of more substance, we have some pupusas. Thank you, Jen. And thank you, Steve. Yeah.
Remarks here. So I want to thank.
Eli.
So I really want to thank Jen and Gabby for a wonderful presentation and showing us these films, many of which are very disturbing, sadly. Let me conclude my portion of the program by saying that quite often we hear from presenters who don't ask and don't need to ask their audiences for funding. But once in a while, like tonight, we're inspired by an organization whose work depends on grants and donations. We've supported DonkeySaddle with an annual contribution for the past several years. And in honor of Jen's visit to Boston, today we're going to make a special contribution as an incentive for her to return. So if you too are inspired by DonkeySaddle's work, please consider supporting it with a donation. There are three things that make DonkeySaddle worthy of our support, and I wanted to just tell you what they are. First, its mission is consistent with our values, especially when it's working so hard to stop Israeli apartheid and end the human rights inequality imposed by Jews, I'm a Jew, non-Jews living between the river and the sea. Second, DonkeySaddle has a track record that proves its product is top quality and that it has significant motivational impact on its audiences. And third, DonkeySaddle has demonstrated the ability to grow its organization and develop new partnerships. Think about it. Jen created DonkeySaddle in 2009 as a brand for her freelance work. 8 years later, in 2017, when she envisioned projects too big or too complex for just one person, she consciously began to morph DonkeySaddle from being a personal brand into something much larger. 5 years pass, and DonkeySaddle is now a 6-person organization. It's earned respect and support from major grant makers, and it's expanded its donor base, and it's working with more partners. In short, DonkeySaddle continues to grow, and we think it's a great investment. And if you feel as we do, I hope you'll make that investment along with us. So thank you very much, and thank you, Jen.
One last little thing I wanted to share with Jen. This is from a Watertown friend of mine, and it's her name is Joanne Hamill, and she's a treasure. She's a choral director and a round maker, and this is a round that she wrote, and I got to sing with her. There is not three of me, unfortunately, so I'll just sing the line 3 times through. Out beyond ideas of right making and wrong making, there is a field, I'll meet you there. Out beyond ideas of wrong making and right making, there is a field, I'll meet you there. Out beyond ideas of wrong making and right making, there is a field, I'll meet you there. Thanks, everybody. That's a poem by Rumi, by the way.